I also learned a lot about, what a third party can't do. It's like, wait, we're in it, we're in the weeds all day long. I mean, there's only so much a third party group is gonna do, right? They're not gonna be there every single day because they tend to be out of state. And your manager is your first line of defense. So I think I learned some technical skills from just like, oh, this is how you guys do it, right? But I think we also learned as much about, what we could potentially do better because, we're in it to win it. And I'm dreaming about the hotel at 2:00 in the morning and wondering why the other guy isn't. And it's not their fault. I mean, it's just the nature of owning an asset and managing it on behalf of somebody else. There's always gonna be that degree. I mean, there's just no comparison. So yeah, I think it was a great exercise, and I would encourage anybody, to seek out, third parties to kind of help get you going, and then eventually take it over yourself. I think that's a really good way to go.
Ethan, I always like to get into people's backstory and how you got into the hotel business. Did it come from a desire to be in hospitality? Did it come from the real estate angle? I want to kind of get right to your taproot moment for hospitality.
Well, I'll tell you, Jake, there was a desire early on. I didn't know how to get into the business, but we totally fell into it. I had no background in it, no hospitality training, never worked in a hotel. My family had zero connection to the space, but I traveled a lot in my youth. And I always associated travel with hotels, or at least the idea that if you had a hotel in a destination, you'd have to travel to that destination to, monitor or, hang out or whatever it would happen to be. So in my mind early on, I think even probably in high school, I was like, I just had a hotel in, New York, Paris, London, wherever. I'd just have to jet around and we just, live this, this glamorous hotel lifestyle, or at least justify the ability to travel and write it off. Well, it didn't happen that way. I actually got into real estate, started off in land development, which was my family's business. Did not love the business. Good way to make money, but did not evoke the passion inside of me. And went to New York, got a graduate degree at NYU in real estate finance. And, started off in the apartment space. Actually, I lied. I started off in the debt purchasing. I was buying distressed debt in real estate, and then got into the apartment business. And then it was just kind of a small miracle that we were kind of right post Great Recession. And my partner at the time, Philip Welker, said, "Hey, there's a little 28-room hotel for sale in Knoxville, Tennessee. Why don't we buy it?" And I go, "Holy shit, we're going to lose our shirt. What do we know about the hotel business, especially in Knoxville, especially at 28 rooms?" The whole thing, I was like, "What are we doing? What are we doing?" He goes, "Hey, we're buying it for $1 million. How bad can it be?" And that in a nutshell is how we got into the hotel business.
So in your earlier real estate days, what turned you off from, whether it was multi, whether it was debt, whether it was land development, and why did you want to experience the joy and the pain of hospitality? Like what was it about those things that just didn't align with you?
I've always liked operating businesses. I don't think I'm made to just sit behind a computer and just whether it's high finance or legal work, or I have to be active. I want to pull levers. I want to make small changes. My wife hates this about me, but every time I go anywhere, I take notes, and I could list off to the general manager, whether it's a restaurant or a hotel or just a service business or a retail business. I could sit there and just tell them everything that's wrong with their business, and they could improve it, if they just followed these, handful of steps. So I like businesses that you can improve upon daily. So that's one element of the hotel business that I perceive that I would like, right? But I never worked in the business. And the other part of the hotel business, especially the boutique side, which is really where we've call it specialized or an area that we've focused in on, is the design. And so I really love graphic design, interior design, photography. I mean, you name it, I love design, and I always wanted to find a way to merge my business interests with my real estate background, with this desire to make the world more beautiful. And that's kind of how I see it. When you pass by an ugly house that was just built, a McMansion, you go, oh my God, the proportions are all off. They just done this, this, and this. And that is what drives me to do better and to build beautiful properties. So there's that element as well. And then, of course, the third is the real estate component of hotels, which allows you to, get all the benefits of real estate, right? So you get to lever it. You can raise money around it. You can build a restaurant. No one ever invests. No one likes to invest in restaurants, but somehow they invest in hotels with the restaurants. So you can that's the loophole that only we know, Jake. So we get to have fun in that space. So I think design, real estate, and the operational change that you can make daily.
What were the early real estate insights you had that you then realized you could apply those to hospitality and hotels?
I'm not sure if I had that many, but I do think that one of the things that we figured out early on was that ended up benefiting us was working in secondary and tertiary markets. I lived in New York City for 10 years. And I'll be honest with you, Jake, I couldn't figure it out. That market is so efficient and it's so razor thin that you're buying at a 5.5 cap. You have to get XYZ tenants out to stabilize, and then you sell it. It's so, the margins are so thin. If you screw up, that wasn't attractive to me. I'm a little bit of an old-fashioned real estate guy. I just like to buy something where it underwrites on paper, and maybe things don't underwrite to 10 caps anymore. That world doesn't exist of our grandparents' age, where somebody used to say, "Oh, yeah, you take a property, you do some stuff, and you double your money." Those days, that's from like the 1940s. That doesn't happen anymore. The world's too efficient. There's too much money. But I couldn't figure out New York. It would always worried me, and I like to have a nice cushion. And so I think what I learned was that secondary and tertiary markets were more attractive to me because they allowed, obviously there's less competition. Cap rates were, I don't know, I'll make a stab at it, 200 basis points higher. You could build something people appreciate. You probably had standing longer before the next guy came in and built something bigger, taller, nicer. And so, as it turns out, in the US, the secondary and tertiary markets have actually, in some cases, outperformed the bigger markets. Charleston, Savannah, Austin, Nashville. Obviously, these markets have all blown up since, but I'm talking about 15 years ago, compared to, call it LA, Chicago. New York's an anomaly, clearly. So I think we went with our heart and our comfort level. And actually, the market ended up following us. And I think that was just pure luck. But still, clearly, it's important to go where you're comfortable. And I would say that's probably the lesson that I've learned.
What gave you comfort in those secondary and tertiary markets to pick, which you happen to be in like the hottest ones, and you just listed some of the hot ones. They're all kind of in the South, but I don't know. Did you ever think about going to Detroit? Like that probably hasn't done as well, obviously, as Savannah or Charleston. So maybe what are some of those differences that you were able to identify early on that landed you in some very competitive markets?
Our thesis 15 years ago was that everyone in the middle of the country wanted what the coast always had. And that's probably been the case for fashion, and it probably goes back forever. But within the, call it independent boutique space, and Jake, you know this. You had Joie de Vie and Kimpton on the West Coast, and you had Ian Schrager and Morgan's on the East, and then you had Ace, and but nobody had anything in the middle. And so I had spent enough time in New York to know what I liked, realizing that didn't really exist. And so our competitive edge was bringing concepts from the coast to the middle of the country. And where we first started was Knoxville. And the example there was we did this, and we did it on the cheap. We did a beautiful job and people were very complimentary, but boy, we bootstrapped it. The Oliver Hotel, which was 28 rooms, we hired an apartment interior renovation team. We picked carpet and wallpaper. We used this really fantastic interior designer. She was our first project. She did it on the cheap for us, and we just like threw it together in 6 months. And Philip, my partner, said, "Hey, let's do a little speakeasy." It was 600 square feet, which we're all familiar with if you live in the major cities. That did not exist. And I think we converted the space. It was actually a sitting room in the lobby. We just walled it off. We took a sitting room, walled it off. It cost us $30,000. The most expensive item there was the hand printed Japanese wallpaper for $5,000, and the banquettes were $8,000. I bought all the stainless from a going out of business sale of a restaurant down the street. I actually had 6 frat guys carry all the equipment for a 6-pack of beer and free entrance to the bar we opened. And we opened this thing, and it took a couple months for the audience to build, but it ended up being super successful. And here we are 12 years later, it's still very successful because it was a concept that did not exist. A small 600 square foot bar is very hard to build out in a traditional kind of long, bowling alley style retail space. And so you end up with these long bars. There's no intimacy. And so that's one example of bringing concepts in and being successful. And we can go on and on, but we brought in great designers from New York who I still work with until this day. And so what made us comfortable is the fact that there aren't a lot of deep-pocketed investors in secondary and tertiary markets. Obviously, there are exceptions. I mean, there are many exceptions today, but I'm talking about 10, 15 years ago. Deep-pocket investors who had the taste level that the younger kind of creative class wanted. And then you had the creative class people that had no money, so you couldn't buy a hotel because a hotel is a complex financial development project. And so we kind of came in, and there was kind of the loophole for us where we kind of came with that hat and knew how to do it. And the final thing I'll answer for you is we are working on a project in Detroit. I can't reveal it because I haven't been given the green light by my partners up there. But for the last 2 years, we've been working on a project. It's going to be a boutique independent hotel right downtown next to the Opera House. It's going to be gorgeous, super cool. And I'm excited for that to get under construction and open up in 2028.
So let's start there. Like, Detroit's been a mixed market, and I'm curious to know, like, how do you identify that there's going to be enough demand, that the venture is going to be profitable, that everything's going to work when you're going into a market that may be less obvious, whether it's Detroit or it's Knoxville? Like, how do you now, as an experienced person, figure out what the special ingredients are to get it to work? Because you can build the coolest, prettiest little hotel, but then how do you know that people are going to come and it'll become a successful investment?
Basis. The answer is you don't know, Jake. You don't know if it'll be successful, but the 2 best ways to determine success, or I call it 3, and again, this is obvious, is what's the competitive landscape like? Can you at least compete at the level of the other ones in the market? You might be the only one, which is even better. Does the ADR support the property objectives? And a lot of these deals, you're going to a market where it's only Hilton Garden Inns, and then you have a independent hotel, but it's really not what you're talking about. It's like it's apples and oranges, and so you have to sit there and go, I think I can get an extra $100 in ADR. I think I can, because look at this city over here. So we're always talking to our market study groups and saying, hey, you're not going to find what you're looking for here, but look at what we've done in these cities, and then look at what this person's did it in this one, and they can stretch a little bit, and then the next step is a leap of faith. That's the second part, and the third part is basis. And so you really never know. And so the best thing to do in real estate is to either buy cheap or build at a price point where if you had to get out, you can get out. And so a lot of our deals tend to be tax credit or incentive-based deals. We're either buying or buying the real estate at a price per pound that feels really good. Like you can buy a historic building for $50 a square foot, and then you automatically get federal historic tax credits. Maybe you get state historic tax credits if your state has that program. In South Carolina, you have the abandoned building credit program, which is on top of those other two. We've been in scenarios where you can get a facade grant, you can get a city improvement grant. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it to a point. And so we end up trying to get our basis low enough to where there's a comfort level where if all of our levers get pulled and we still don't hit our pro forma, we can at least get out clean. And I think that is the responsibility of any, call it real estate syndicator, when you're raising outside money. And so again, we just look at those three things. Nashville is a town where we had a great basis. We sold our property here. Lots of competition. It's really hard to keep up with the Joneses in Nashville. Really hard to keep up with the Joneses in New York City. New York City has a natural, barrier to growth because it's an island. But, Nashville, Atlanta, those are markets where we've seen increased competition, and it gets harder and harder. So, if you can't find a market with a natural, physical or natural barrier to growth, find one that's maybe a little bit off the radar. and then when too many people show up, maybe it's time to get out. So I think, I hope that answers your question, but that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, it does. I mean, if you think about hotels over the past probably 10 years, supply has really been a number one killer of every great hotel business idea. And I was just ChatGPTing the other day. I'm like, how many hotels per capita does Europe have versus the US? And, I don't know that it was totally accurate, but it's basically 3-1 is what it was. I mean, US has 3 times more hotels per person than Europe. And there was just a ton of oversupply. And a lot of that was brought on by the brands. You've kind of done a little bit of both. Can we talk about why you tend to focus maybe more on the independent stuff and what your experience has been like with branded hotels?
Sure. So, I obviously what we run is a business, but we've all read these great stories about if you do what you love, you won't work a day in your life. And so I think a lot of that kind of helps us work on our business in a way that's truly attractive. We love what we do. If I could do boutique hotels, I would do those every day of the week. And that's inspiring to me. It's the passion. I don't like to think of it as a passion project because that scares people. We usually base everything in really good financial underwriting and a thesis. But at the end of the day, it's got to be exciting. And that is what drives us to do hotels, specifically in the boutique independent space, is that excitement. And that's why we primarily look for these basis deals. Now, every so often, we'll find a deal that just wants to grow up and be a branded hotel. Not every little hotel gets to dream big, and sometimes the branded ones are super successful, phenomenal. And so I don't mean to dog any brand. Brands are so powerful, and trust me, we use them. So I'll give you an example. If we're kind of sub 100 keys in a smaller market, we'll go independent all day long. If we're 150 keys or greater, we'll definitely go soft brand. So we're working on the former Grand Hotel of Knoxville. It'll be 192 keys. It's probably getting a little bit, heavy for an independent to pull off, unless it was in an even larger city. And so we'll probably end up with one of the majors as a soft brand. So that's something we'll do. We just did a conversion of a hotel in Clarksville, Tennessee, to a DoubleTree. I think it was a Ramada back in the 80s. And then it deflagged. It became the Riverview Inn for 25 plus years. It's exactly what you think it is. I mean, it looks like an old Ramada from the 80s. And, Clarksville is a great town. And I'd love to do a boutique hotel there. the ADR does not support what we would like to build, at least at that scale. This is 155 keys. And so DoubleTree ended up being the perfect brand for that property. People love the Hilton affiliation. They love the points. We get broad distribution. We have excellent occupancy, and we're very happy to partner with Hilton on that. So that was an opportunistic deal. And so we're not afraid to be, we're not afraid to be kind of good old fashioned real estate folks either, right? I mean, there are the passion deals and then the deals that sometimes pay the bills, and I don't, and I, and, a friend of mine in New York always says, Ethan, by the time you built your 10 boutique hotels, you could have built 100 Hampton Inns and probably made a lot more money. It's probably true, but you have to love what you do. And that's not to besmirch anybody that builds Hampton Inns. Those are very, very successful businesses. It just doesn't get me up in the morning the way the other properties do. And so we try to do a mix. And I'm sure that's probably, the way you look at things as well. And I have one more thing. We just took on a third-party management assignment of the Modern Hotel in Sarasota, which is a Tribute under the Marriott brand. So now we manage both Hilton and Marriott. And I got to tell you, my team has really enjoyed going through the training for both of those brands. And we've learned so much. They have an incredible program. I mean, they're efficient. They've just got incredible technology. And so honestly, we draft off that a little bit too. So we learn by understanding, our kind of branded competitors in the market, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, I keep going back and forth with the brands. They have incredible training, they have incredible standards, but there's just so many of them and they are still so powerful. But I think their challenge from an owner's perspective is the supply that they're putting into the system, because they're validating maybe hotels that might be too much supply in a certain market or might work for them but don't work for the owner. So that's kind of where I'm struggling with right now. But I agree with you. In some markets, just these soft brand pipelines are so powerful relative to an unknown hotel in that same market.
Yeah, it's just the reality of where we stand, and you really can't escape it unless you're just in a true destination worthy city like Charleston, right? Charleston thrives on these 50 key hotels. And you're going there, and listen, there are people obviously who are going to go spend their points that they've accumulated with Hilton and Marriott. But for the other half of the population, they're trying to avoid those. And the whole part of going to Charleston is stay in your favorite little inn that's owned by a family or owned by, maybe it's a conglomerate. But the point is that it feels independent. It is independent in many regards. And so sometimes actually you put a glass ceiling on yourself, right? By associating. So there's definitely, there's an art to it. I don't know if it's obviously there's a science as well. Our whole thing is if your lender lets you do it and your investors let you do it and you build to a standard where you could quickly, pivot, build it as a independent, and you can always call the next day, and I swear they will fly down on their jet and they will sign a deal with you the very next day. And so you too can be part of a brand if you fall on times that call for them. That's how I look at it.
You're 100% correct. I want to go back to this first hotel you did. Because if you haven't built your own hotel, it's so inspiring if you're creative and you like serving people and setting up experiences. Can you kind of describe those early moments when you knew nothing and you were setting up this business in this hotel?
Yeah, I was living in New York City. I just got married. I had no job except for this, which wasn't producing any income. I rented a desk for $250 a month from my friend Josh Carr, who's an Excel guru in New York, still is a great guy. And we had kind of like a co-work space, pre-co-work space. And all I knew was I had to support a wife and a kid on the way. I was like, I'm going to make this 28-room hotel the best thing I can pull off with the funds we had. And I was like, okay, property management system. I just went online and typed in PMS, what found a handful. So we found one because previous to that, I think it was they had a paper calendar and a doorbell. I swear to God. And Robin was the general manager. She sat in this chair at the front desk. It was very old fashioned. And so I did that, and then I found a company that sold like mini, toothbrushes and mini toothpaste. And then I found a company that sold pillows. And then you get all these free samples. By the way, I got to tell you, sometimes I think I build hotels just to get the free pillow sample every so often. It's a lot of fun. Every pillow in the house is a different pillow. So I think we had a lot of fun with just trying stuff and figuring it out. And that's my superpower is I can hyper focus and I can stay up 18 hours just like looking up stuff online to like buy to improve the guest experience. So there was a lot of passion, still is passion. Obviously the portfolio has grown and you can't just hyper focus on one hotel, but I got to tell you, I had the most fun I ever had just figuring it out, and seeing how kind of, cheap you could buy something, you kind of, you know how it is. It's like, but as you get bigger, you don't have the time. So all of a sudden you start paying market price but when you're kind of young and hungry and you have limited funds, you figure out how to bootstrap it. And Knoxville ended up really being the best market for us to get going as a business. It just had all the right elements. And so that's just one example. I mean, I could list 100 others, but for anyone who's watching this, I would always recommend, start small. Obviously if you have the funding, start big. I mean, because there's only so much you can do with a small property, but start small, find a town that has no small hotel or no boutique hotel and be the best thing in town. And you can probably pull it off and make good money if you have a high ADR and a good bar program. I'd say those are your two elements for success.
Can you walk me through, now that you've refined your craft and you're really known for the design and the branding, what your process looks like to start a hotel and where the whole design and branding process begins for a new project for you?
This is probably going to scare people, but there's not a whole lot of process. The way we find deals is fairly opportunistic. And so we don't have $100 million fund with a single brand saying, okay, you have 5 years to put out $100 million and you pick the 8 best cities in the country and go for it. I would like to do that. And Jake, we should talk after this and maybe we can develop that plan, because that'd be a hell of a lot easier if I just had a money in the bank and a directive. But unfortunately, our deals end up kind of just coming to us. And we have, we talk to brokers, we talk to friends, we talk to you, and we say, hey, we're looking at that. Hey, you should check this thing out. And that's kind of how everything has kind of come to us, is you should check this thing out. or, hey, what's that building on that corner? It's been sitting vacant for a while. We should call on it, find out who owns it. They don't know. Maybe they don't know what, it's an office building. It's being sold as an office building. We can probably convert it. It's got great bones. Or this deal in Aiken, South Carolina that I'm involved with right now that we hope to close in May. I called a broker in South Carolina. Actually, I'll step back 1 degree. I had a guy call me out of the blue from Spartanburg, said, hey, I've been staying with you at the Oliver for years. I love what you guys do there. Please bring the Oliver to Spartanburg. I'm like, great. Show me a deal. Show me a piece of property. I'd love to do something with you. Looked and looked. We couldn't find anything, which is fine. But I was like, we got to be in the Carolinas. I mean, that's where things are happening. So I just got off my butt. I called the broker at Collier's in Columbia. I said, hey, I'm a hotel developer. Just show me deals in South Carolina. Anything. This is my box. And so I got a call and they said, hey, we got this deal in Aiken. I go, Aiken? Aiken where? I go, Aiken, South Carolina. I go, all right. It was a very complex deal. We flew down there, took a look at it. And my first hunch was, oh my God, it's a small town. complex deal. Are we going to be able to get the rate? Is this going to pencil? And the more we looked at it, the more we said, wow, this is an incredible town, number one. Two, there are actually a lot more levers in this deal than we anticipated, meaning between the acquisition price and the layers of incentives that we could implement. We could, if it, so my thought was, okay, if we could buy this for X, we can layer this on. If I get to this basis, maybe then I'll do it. And then as you get deeper and you learn about the people and the opportunity, it just goes, okay, it makes sense. Of course, by the time you get to the end of that underwriting, 6 months later, your costs have doubled. Because you're always going optimistic, Jake.
Yep. Welcome to the hotel business.
Your costs doubled, but the good news is that where you thought your rate and occupancy were going to be, they end up being better because we sandbag in our minds. I'm not a pessimist, but I try to be as much of a realist as possible. I am Jake. I can kill any deal you throw in front of me. That's like my specialty. It's like, I don't know. We're going to lose our shirt, which is healthy. It's healthy skepticism is important in a relationship, but you need to have your yin to your yang, and you need to have somebody else kind of like, pull it out from you. Otherwise you'd be scared to do anything. And so on that deal, we just, we're super excited by it. And so I guess maybe to come full circle, our process is to just look for markets where we can really stand out. And I pointed that out earlier. We look for markets where they want us. And that town actually wanted us. Turned out years earlier, I found out somebody had actually thrown our name out into the hat to the mayor and said, hey, you should really invite this group to go do this deal. And I mean, wow, what a great feeling. I mean, all these years later that your name finally gets out there and people are talking about, I mean, I hope, I think we do a good job, but, I think we really just try to be very opportunistic, let things kind of come up organically. We don't have the pressure of a fund to put dollars out. We just let it kind of come to us and try to do 1 or 2 deals a year. And that feels pretty good.
Can you walk us through your approach to the design of it? So now you've found this property in Aiken. How do you know what it's going to be? How do you figure out how to make it cool? How do you figure out how to make it inspiring? Are you going to have a bar? Are you going to have a restaurant? What are the rooms going to look like? What is the story of the hotel? What is your approach there?
So that's the fun part. That Jake, that usually is what, that's what gets me into the deal. Once the economics gets figured out, then I kind of go whole hog on the design. I go all in. We have a bench of designers we've worked with for many years. I try to introduce new designers every so often because there's so many talented people out there, and I love the creatives. I mean, that's just, if I could be like my next life, I want to be an artist in some Soho loft in 1972. I mean, like that'd be fun. And so I like hanging out with the creative folks in the process. And so for our boutique deals, it has to have a storyline. And if you can't figure out that storyline within 2 seconds of looking at that building, it's not going to work. And I don't care if it's modern. It can be built. If it's too modern, okay, listen, I mean, they're super modern. I mean, there's some incredible.
1980s office building is tough, though.
1980s is probably a tough year. 1970s is great.
Right.
80s is tough. But I think it's going to have its day, right? Obviously, there's some interesting brutalist stuff that I think is starting to kind of pop up that could be interesting. But I think it can have a story, a historic story, obviously great detail, crown molding, frescoes. It could have whatever. It could also just be super zen, have a incredible Japanese aesthetic. I would love to do an Amman hotel, in Hokkaido. I mean, and that would be fun too, right? And so it just has to have something you can sell as a story, and it can be super clean, and it can be super kind of like, funky. So, the Claremont definitely had the funkiest story of funky stories in Atlanta. And everybody, who's listening to this, And if you're from the Southeast, you may have heard of the Claremont, but it's got a storied history. And, the funny thing is, we weren't the only ones to figure that it had a great story. Alex Calderwood from Ace really wanted to make it an Ace. And we spoke to Ace, and it would have been great. I mean, I love what Ace has done, still does. Obviously, it's evolved, but they broke things out, and I have mad respect for what they do. But they recognized the story, and what it was a 1940s apartment building. I'm sorry, 1920s apartment building that got converted to a hotel in the 1940s. And for decades, the lounge in the basement transformed from a steakhouse to a Playboy bar to multiple iterations under different names as different bars. And over time, people wore fewer clothes in that space. And up until today, and it lives as call it it's a burlesque show in a dive bar, and it's beloved by Atlantans, myself included, and it's a lot of fun. And so how do you take a building that's got a past of as an apartment building, high-end apartment building that got turned into a hourly hotel that became drug infested, prostitution infested, with a storied lounge in the basement that we completely transformed into a high-end, high-design boutique hotel that played homage to its 1920s history and also 1970s history, when it was truly on the wrong side of the tracks. And I don't mean that, except for the fact that there was a drug and prostitution problem on that side of town. And so what we did was, we try to write like a single line that describes what the vision is. The vision here was it was your great grandmother's hotel that got taken over by her punk rock grandkids who spray painted over grandma's frescoes. And so it's kind of got this layering effect. And we ended up working with Elvin Dyack from Family Brothers, who's an incredible design group out of Atlanta. Ended up finding them after a search of around 30 odd graphic designers. And Elvin, hit it right in the bullseye. And our branding really kind of speaks to that juxtaposition and that dichotomy. And just like this, it's like at one point he drew the picture of a concierge, on a card, and then scribbled on top of it as though somebody was like, on some kind of hallucinogenic, kind of, scrawly, scripty writing. And so again, it was this like idea that like you were going to kind of like live this kooky, overnight, lifestyle. We may have played a little bit too hard on that, but that story just, it bellowed out storylines that we couldn't contain ourselves with what direction to go in. It was actually kind of hard, but I would say we know what the storyline is day one. I usually find an interior designer that I know really speaks to that storyline and really kind of understands that language. And they have, and again, any good designer can do just about anything, but everyone has their fallback. Everybody has the thing that they really love. And it's about finding people, whether it's branding groups or interior designers, that love that specific language. And then I usually put them together and hopefully make magic.
Do you have the branding group kind of work your story and put that into a visual or a language and then share that with the interior designer? Or is it more collaborative and everyone's kind of starting at the same time? Because your friend Bashar actually once told me that the way that he does it is he has like a branding company create the story and like this, like almost like a book, like a guide. And then you can give that around to your different designers and talk to them and see how they react. And that's what he does.
And Bashar is way smarter than I am. So, I should probably take Bashar's advice.
He just posted on LinkedIn, but I don't know if he's smarter.
He's great with words. Bashar's right. That's what you probably should do. I'm probably, I don't know if I'm probably, I try to get the deal underway before I start spending real dollars. Eventually you hire a group and they do the storybook. But to me, I've got in my brain, my investor group looks at our portfolio and goes, the guys eventually get to the right answer. So even if their presentation isn't that great, they know what they're doing. And I always end up working with designers who get it. I just know they get it. I don't have to know. I know it before they even put it on paper. The paper is just to again, represent it so you can actually but I kind of do that a little bit later. If I had unlimited funds, of course, I would hire the branding group today. I'd have all the pretty stuff. My presentation would look amazing. I'd have all this pretty graphics and, I'd draw it. But I try to be very thoughtful in how I spend on the front side of the project.
Was it intentional for you to set up the management company and do real estate development? Did you ever think oh, we'll just develop the hotel and then I'll find someone else to manage it? Or was it always for you, no, we have to manage and we have to own it and we have to develop or create it?
Great question. I don't think we knew any different. And when you build a 28-room hotel, and maybe different than Jake, I think you at least have one smaller hotel in your portfolio. It probably has $1,000 ADR. If you have $150 ADR 28-room hotel, who are you going to hire? And so we had to do it ourselves. And I had no income. I got married. I had a kid on the way. I had no income. And so, when you're doing $1 million of revenue and you take a 3% fee and you have to split it 50-50, that's $15,000 that I didn't have.
Yep.
Truly. I mean, that's really what it was. And so we had to be the managers because we needed an income. And because who else was going to devote the time and energy to a 28-room hotel the way we were going to? And we could also kind of take fees as we had the money, right? So that's the other nice thing about managing a property is when things get tight, you can stop paying yourself. It doesn't always work the other way around, although we've been generous under circumstances when we're the third-party manager. That doesn't always work to our advantage down the road, but we try to live by our own standards and rules. So we ended up starting in the management business 15 years ago, but you'll like this, Jake. We ended up doing 2 larger deals 2 years later. Well, we got into them, but by the time we actually got them open, it was probably 4 years later. And Philip turned to me and said, let's not be idiots. Just because we're managing a 28-room hotel doesn't mean we can simultaneously manage 200-key hotels with massive food and beverage operations. We don't have the bench. We have probably more to lose than to gain. And let's do a short-term management contract and then take them over down the road. And that's what we did. We ended up doing a short-term deal. I think it was a 36-month deal, which I think a lot of management companies might do. Not all of them, but some of them might. And you can kind of stabilize the asset and kind of, just get yourself positioned to know what fees will come in so that you can then kind of equate that back to what your overhead would be to start hiring internally. And that's what we did. It took a couple years to figure out. And that transition, by the way, occurred 2 months after COVID began. So in, what was it, March or April of 2020. I mean, it was a heavy time to transition to take over all of our properties under a central management umbrella, but we did. And so, some days we wake up and go, what are we doing? It's a hard business. Management's tough. You got to get to a certain critical mass to make money on that side of the called that entity. And then we also talk about how sometimes it takes more effort to manage the manager than just to manage yourself. I respect folks that do not want to manage and just develop. I really have a lot of respect for them. They might be the smarter folks in the room. I have convinced myself, like Apple computers, that in order to kind of present the best hardware, you got to do the software too. And so I think I enjoy having the full control. It does take, I'd say, 80% of my time on the management side. And we probably end up, at this point, probably making more money on the development side. But at a certain point that will flip. And, what we've done to rectify that, which a lot of management companies do, is seek out third-party management contracts. So over the last several years, actually, even before COVID, back in 2018, we did our first third-party deal. We actually built a hotel on behalf of somebody and managed it for them through stabilization. And so we have 3 third-party contracts today, and we're seeking more. We're not advertising, but we're finding them organically as they come to us with properties that just do exactly what we do well. I'm probably not the right operator for a 250 room Renaissance or a 300 room Renaissance hotel or an airport hotel or there's a lot of companies that probably could do that maybe better, cheaper. But if somebody had a, 150 key or less property with heavy food and beverage, heavy lifestyle branding, heavy programming, that's something we'd love to take on. And that's how I see us kind of growing in the management business. And once you get to call it, 100 million in sales, managed revenues, then I think you really have a real management company and they can stand on its own 2 feet. But no, we did not set out to start a management company. It was just, if you have a mom and pop restaurant, you run the restaurant, you own the restaurant. I mean, there's no separation of duties. And that's how we got started.
I want to go back to when you're making this transition during COVID and maybe try and forget all the COVID stuff. What did you start to learn or appreciate kind of seeing the other manager do as compared to what you were doing at the 28 room hotel? And like, how did that make you then think about how you wanted to run and set up your company when you eventually took it over?
Great question. I think it seems obvious to us today, but at the time I didn't, understand, how to structure, how to price out revenue management and how to price out sales and marketing from a corporate allocation perspective, or, what the delivery of a monthly operating document might look like, for an ownership group. I also learned a lot about, what a third party can't do. It's like, wait, we're in it. We're in the weeds all day long. I mean, there's only so much a third party group is gonna do, right? They're not gonna be there every single day because they tend to be out of state, and your manager is your first line of defense. So I think I learned some technical skills from just like, oh, this is how you guys do it, right? But I think we also learned as much about what we could potentially do better because we're in it to win it. And I'm dreaming about the hotel at 2:00 in the morning and wondering why the other guy isn't. And it's not their fault. I mean, it's just the nature of owning an asset and managing on behalf of somebody else. There's always gonna be that degree. I mean, there's just no comparison. So yeah, I think it was a great exercise, and I would encourage anybody, to seek out, third parties to kind of help get you going, and then eventually take it over yourself. I think that's a really good way to go.
It's great advice. I've actually never heard of anyone do it. And, because we've always managed our hotels. And, that $100 million mark is a real thing. But we have hired people from other companies, like maybe I interned for another company, but it's hard to like see what other people are doing. So in some instances, we've actually brought in, not maybe management companies, but like kind of asset management companies that, see how other management companies operate, and maybe we have them consult on a specific area of the hotel, or we bring in a revenue company to look at this, or maybe a sales company to look at this. And that's been helpful for us to get perspectives of like what else is going on in the world, like other than just what you get from conferences and knowing people in the industry and learning from your colleagues.
Yeah, actually, you and I spoke a year and a half ago. I remember actually, I took the calls in New York City, and I was asking you about third-party accounting.
Yep.
And we have great people in our company, and they work their tails off. And we've always had some issues with just getting the right flow in accounting. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that like we're trying to be as efficient as possible. When you have a 28-room hotel, can you really afford an AP clerk? So we had one, we didn't have one, we had one, and it's crazy because you're like, well, no, everything is automated now. You just scan it and send it in. I mean, back in the day, you used to FedEx stuff. I mean, can you imagine, Jake, how they used to do it?
Well, they used to have
But now you always
boxes
can't.
of papers. Like hotels
Right.
are living in like
They
the
ship.
80s. I mean, we did even like we just did this new thing where like the night audit is now all digitized, like maybe 2 years ago. But when like my team was selling me on this idea, they're like, oh yeah, we have like boxes and boxes of papers that we saved for years of like the night audit reports. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, where is that? Like, it's in the back office. I'm like, why would we ever do that?
Yeah, so we've been looking. So again, we've tried to kind of like game the system to figure out the best, most efficient way to do it, and everyone's got a different approach, and you know that firsthand. But one thing that we've just done is we've actually gone third party with accounting. We have our own in-house accounting team. Some of the work we've done now sits with a third party team in Texas. And what they've done actually, to your earlier point, is they work with so many different hotel groups that they're telling us how to improve our internal SOPs. And so we've actually turned the tables, and now they're telling our head of ops, like, hey, this is what to expect from your GM. If your GM can't do that, they need to get out. Whereas before we're like, well, GMs should really be front of the house, managing, guests. They're not accountants. And then I'm like, are they accountants? Are they not accountants? Do you hire for the accounting degree? Do you not? I mean, it's like, and it's crazy because half the time they don't have that capability. That's just not what they're good at. And honestly, I don't want them spending time doing that until we need them to save the money by not having the extra FTE. And so the best thing you can do is, like you said, you hire a third party group to tell you how other people are doing it. And unfortunately, you don't get that from a conference. You can listen to someone all day long, but unless you're actually in the weeds and actually see your stuff, it's all just, whatever. It's optimistic. It feels good. You take it back to your company and they're like, okay, well, what do we do with that? See, so I'm a big believer in bringing third parties in, but caveat emptor. There are plenty of third party consultants who have added very little to our company.
Yep.
And we've spent a lot of money. So do it based on a great reference check, and I can shed light if you call me.
Yeah, that's some really good advice. We looked at going third party accounting. We ended up just building an amazing accounting team, but then our real estate side is third party accounting. So we get kind of the benefit in a different way where all the real estate stuff is a third party accounting. They see a bunch of other hotels and can communicate with our ops team if they, want something in a different way or think something should be done in a different way. But you got to be humble and do it. Other people have answers. People have big egos in real estate, but sometimes you got to get advice from others. That's a big takeaway of mine. I want to talk about food and beverage because that's another one where it's very challenging and people often resort to third parties, their demise or to their success. But you have food and beverage is a big part of your culture and your company. So I want to maybe start from the first 28 room little speakeasy and kind of how F&B evolved in your company to be where it is today.
You hit the heart and the nerve at the same time. F&B is the heart of any great hotel property. We all know that. A great restaurant and a great hotel makes it an extraordinary hotel. And I've eaten some great restaurants, so have you, Jake, and there's just nothing like the experience. And we always want to do that. We thought we're going to have the best restaurant, we're going to have the best service, best food. We really want it to be successful. It's not always a slam dunk. It's so hard. And even when it's good, the next year, the next Joe opens up a restaurant, and it's like, what do I need to do? And then the margins are thin. And so the whole thing is kind of, it's kooky. The great thing about owning a hotel, though, is that the rooms tend to make most of the money. And so thank God, Jake, we're in the hotel business and not necessarily only in the restaurant business.
Yes.
And there are plenty of restaurants that make a ton of money, but the fine dining, which is what we end up doing, and I don't mean white tablecloth, but when you have an entree that's, $30, it's fine dining. I don't, you call it whatever you want, but you're definitely, it's hard to present yourself as a restaurant that, that's an everyday restaurant. We try, and we always end up going a little bit more fine dining by default. So we got our start in the restaurant business with the Oliver Hotel in Knoxville. Actually, the first restaurant we opened was Tupelo Honey, which was a restaurant inside the hotel, only associated through a partnership. We became an owner, a partial owner of it, and they leased from us. And for a short period of time, we ran food service from the restaurant. But then the other restaurant that was actually a tenant in the hotel prior to our takeover went out of business. And we had two choices. We could lease it out or we could operate ourselves. And we tried really hard to lease it out. And all the proposals that came back, I was like, this is not going to work. I mean, it was like fast casual. It was like Cava or Chipotle, but like this. I mean, it didn't look right, didn't feel right. It kind of gave me that,
Yep.
the ickies. I was like, no. We spent too much time at this hotel, and so we convinced ourselves that we would raise a separate SPV from our current investors to open up a restaurant. I think we raised $250,000. It was a $700,000 build out, which sounds crazy today. And I had to convince all of our investors. I was like, you guys, it's in the hotel. We actually paid rent to ourselves. I don't know why we did that to kind of because we had this crazy idea of, keeping the entity separate for liability. Yep. And it was going to be this whole, the restaurant's going to stand on its own 2 feet. It's going to pay rent.
No, you can't do that.
It was a little kooky.
Cheat off the hotel.
You need to cheat off the toe. Well, we eventually had to cheat off the toe. But we said, okay, let's find a great designer. I ended up working with Oliver Hasselgrave from Home out in Greenpoint. He's moved since. And I called up Oliver. I'd seen his name in a magazine back in the day. He was kind of like one of the godfathers of, Brooklyn white subway tile. He kind of was part of that Edison light bulb and white subway tile, era. And Oliver's great. And he said, I've never done a project outside New York City, but my name is Oliver and your hotel is called the Oliver and I will do it for you. I said, great. And he ended up coming down and we built this gorgeous restaurant called Royale. And when we opened, everyone was like, oh my God, this is really nice, maybe too nice. And you don't come across as a special occasion restaurant. That's like a death
I've been
knell.
there.
It's like, oh no, we're not. No, we're a twice a week restaurant, not a once a year Valentine's restaurant. And it freaked me out. And we didn't know what we were doing. I think we had two choices for chefs. We had a guy that cooked at a local restaurant, and a guy that cooked at a country club. It wasn't my dream, but we ended up working with one of the two chefs. We did a cook-off, by the way. We used the conference center kitchen at the local conference center and had a cook-off, a la, Top Chef, and selected this one individual who turned out to be actually an excellent chef, and ended up just finding a general manager who was an assistant general manager somewhere else. And I thought, hey, everyone deserves a chance in life. I've learned a lesson since then a few times. The restaurant didn't do very well, and Jake, I think we were down to the last $10,000 in the bank to cover $15,000 of payroll. 3 days later, I'm like, should have followed my father's advice and not get in the restaurant business. It was tough, and of course we made payroll, and we found a woman who took over as GM, and she whipped that restaurant into shape. And within 6 months, we were profitable.
Wow.
And she grew sales like 20% every year. And that thing's been a rocket ship restaurant for the last decade. And what I learned from that experience is you got to have some luck. I mean, sometimes the market has to catch up to what you're promoting and what your product is. But it's all about the people. And if you have a rock star GM, anything is possible. And she got us to a point where that thing was really making money, and it could definitely pay rent. By that time, we actually merged the two entities because this is ridiculous having two sets of financials and two separate tax returns. But that was our foray into restaurants. And, we've done restaurants ever since. They're still tough. I still don't know the right, the secret to them. We hire great designers, great chefs, great managers. Sometimes they're very successful early on. Sometimes they take a couple of years. There are a lot of ways, and maybe for a separate conversation, we can talk about lease arrangements, third-party arrangements, intellectual property, royalty, naming right relationships. I'll maybe not Jean George, but there are other people you can just kind of rent the name scenarios. And I've looked at all of them. And so we are constantly trying to figure out what the best path is so that the restaurant is an accretive outlet to the overall program and not a distraction and not a bleed. But it's a tough part of the business, but it's a necessary, I won't call it an evil because it's literally the heart and soul, but you just have to live with it. It is part of the operating business.
It's very hard. We've been everywhere you've been and done many of the same things. There's no perfect structure is what we found. Sometimes it makes sense to do it yourself. Sometimes maybe lease it. Sometimes maybe partner with someone. But it is not a business that I want to do on its own. But like the White Barn Inn that we bought in Maine, like the hotel generates all this revenue because of the restaurant, the notoriety that the restaurant has. So you can't just cut that off. And that restaurant actually makes money. But if you get it right, it's exactly what will happen. You will turn a great hotel and a great restaurant into an exceptional property and experience. But it's so hard to do. Although
so hard.
New York make it look easy. I don't understand. Like every corner in New York and every street, it's like amazing restaurants. Every time I go there,
I know.
Good restaurant in Fort Lauderdale. I'm like, New York has like 20 on this one block. I don't understand.
I know. Sometimes you walk in, you're like, if I just transport everything about this into my space, it would be the best restaurant in town.
New York just has 10 billion people on each block, so it's just endless demand. I think that's a unique advantage they have. Captive audience.
But we love the people in the F&B space. They're the hard. And I'll tell you one thing. Another thing I've learned over time is I would always rather hire somebody from F&B to work in a hotel than hotel to work in F&B.
Yep.
They know hard work. Everybody does. I don't mean to. I think you know what I'm saying here. We've been very successful in bringing people from the F&B world to manage hotels.
Yeah. They're like, oh, I don't have to clean up at 2 a.m. This is great.
Yeah.
What about programming and design? Because you have a couple hotels under construction, in planning, that you're building, that you're renovating. What are kind of the key things that you are thinking about now as like non-negotiables, whether it's in the lobby, in the guest rooms? What are you thinking about as a fundamental basis? You have to have this.
So I think obviously the health and wellness theme is alive and well. And if you're a large enough property or you have the flexibility in space planning, adding some kind of spa amenity is a no-brainer. And it could just be a room with a shower, a cold plunge, and a infrared sauna, right? It could just be something as simple as that. Obviously, the greatest risk in the spa game is your full-time employee, is your labor cost. I'll pause there for a second. I thought a non-negotiable a decade ago was to do a barista in the lobby of our hotel.
Well, I think we all did. By the way, do you or no? Or you moved off?
No. I love it. But I'll get to my punchline here. It was costing us $250,000 a year to run it, and we only taken $170,000 of gross receipts. And so, it was the coolest coffee shop that made no money, and it happened to us twice. And so it can be great, but gosh, that automatic machine just, it may not make a ton of money, but at least it's in the black.
Yep.
So I think maybe it's evolved to the Moxie model where you've got, the front desk associate also pouring you a cup of coffee or giving you a drink. I mean, it's all about the labor. So I thought that was non-negotiable. I'd still like to do it because I think it creates the ambiance, the atmosphere, but maybe start integrating back into the bar program because every single hotel on the block has got a coffee shop now. I think the game's over. I was also against doing coffee in the rooms because I thought I would force people to go down to the lobby and get that fresh cup of coffee. Mistake. Well, I mean, again, as one of my colleagues likes to say, Ethan, stop building the hotel for yourself. You're not the average Joe. The average Joe wants to watch a sports game somewhere in the hotel his wife probably wants to get a cup of coffee before she goes downstairs. So now I do coffee in the rooms, but something we've started to integrate is a amenity station on each floor. It's such an easy thing to do and such a nice perk. When you get off the elevator, somewhere around you, there's a small little, cutout with maybe a fridge, a freezer, sparkling water, maybe a coffee station, maybe a bowl full of candy, something that's a little bit of a surprise and delight. If you design it into your plans early on, it's really not a big cost. It's super easy to do. A lot of the hotels I started to see now are doing it. And then you can offer complimentary snacks there. It doesn't cost you very much money. So I'd say spa wellness, even in kind of a self-service scenario, would be great. If you have enough of a key count or of enough external demand from the public, you could afford to have somebody stand at the front, be at the front desk, and then you can offer even more spa-like amenities. But I think that's a really nice perk, and we're doing that in both Knoxville and Aiken. And it could be, and if you want to go crazier, we've talked about doing, wet saunas, dry saunas, plunge pools. I mean, you can kind of get crazy, but that's kind of the theme of the moment. I don't know how long that's going to last. I hope it's not like axe throwing, because it's a pretty expensive investment. But I think those are both non-negotiable. And obviously we can go into bathrooms, and we're way past the time of just doing tub showers. Obviously, we only do showers now, and I'm trying to think of what else we do in the rooms. Obviously, the desks have become smaller and smaller. People just work in beds. We try to invest a lot into quality of the sheets, quality of the pillows. I'm a huge believer in doing 2 hypoallergenic pillows and 2 beautiful down pillows. I don't always follow my own advice. Sometimes my advice gets swallowed up by whoever's running the hotel at the time. And so I come back and I'm like, that's not what I thought we ordered. But I'm a big believer in a really great bed experience and sleep experience. So I think those are probably the 2 that come to mind.
It's amazing. Ethan, I asked all the guests on the podcast the same closing question. What is your favorite hotel outside of your portfolio?
Oh gosh. I knew you were going to ask this question. What's my favorite hotel? I don't know. I usually make my wife sleep in Airbnbs. We have 3 kids. Well, I'll answer with this. My favorite hospitality experience is probably not what you expect. It's sleeping in a thatched roof, mud facade hut in East Africa. I love the safari experience. I love the glamping experience if done right. I've done it where it's 20 degrees out and the dog is frozen and doesn't move, and I will not do that again. If you don't feed the fire at 2 a.m, you freeze. You still pay the $450 a night. I will not do that. At that price point, you should feed my fire. But I love waking up and having no windows and watching wildlife. That to me is a great lifestyle experience hotel. That to me trumps, fine Italian sheets. Just having the dry air and hot chai and going on a walking safari. That's the epitome of great hospitality.
Thanks for coming on the podcast. This was a lot of fun. And I'll probably invite you back again if you're willing. And we got to keep sharing more stories.
Jake, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
Hey, everyone. It's Jake here. Thanks again for joining me on this conversation. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Lastly, don't forget to follow me on Twitter @JWurzak. I'll see you in the next episode.
Jake Wurzak is the founder and CEO of Dove Hill Capital Management. All opinions expressed by Jake and his guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Dove Hill Capital Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not reflect or represent real estate, financial, or investment advice.